Joseph Smith, Jr. was born in 1805 and died in 1844. He was an American religious leader and founder of Mormonism and the Latter-day Saints movement. When he was 24, Smith published the Book of Mormon. By the time of his death 14 years later, he had attracted tens of thousands of followers and founded a religious culture that continues to the present. Smith was born in Sharon, Vermont, but by 1817 he had moved with his family to the burned-over district of western New York, a site of intense religious revivalism during the Second Great Awakening. According to Smith, he experienced a series of visions, including one in which he saw two personages, presumably God the Father and Jesus Christ, and others in which an angel named Moroni directed him to a buried book of golden plates, inscribed with a Judeo-Christian history of an ancient American civilization. In 1830, Smith published what he said was an English translation of these plates, the Book of Mormon. The same year, he organized the Church of Christ, calling it a restoration of the early Christian church. Members of the church were later called Latter-day Saints or Mormons, and in 1838 Smith announced a revelation that renamed the church as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The burned-over district refers to the western and central regions of New York in the early 19th century, where religious revivals and the formation of new religious movements of the Second Great Awakening took place. The term was coined by Charles Grandison Finney, who in his 1876 book, Autobiography of Charles G. Finney, referred to the burned district to denote an area in central and western New York State during the Second Great Awakening. He felt that the area had been so heavily evangelized as to have no fuel, no unconverted population left over to burn or convert. The Second Great Awakening was a Protestant religious revival movement during the early 19th century in the United States. The movement began around 1790, gained momentum by 1800, and after 1820 membership rose steadily among the Baptist and Methodist congregations, whose preachers led the movement. It was past its peak by the late 1850s. The Great Second Awakening reflected Romanticism characterized by enthusiasm, emotion, and an appeal to the supernatural. It rejected the skeptical rationalism and deism of the Enlightenment. Western New York was still a frontier during the early Erie Canal boom, and professional and established clergy were scarce. Many of the self-taught people were susceptible to the enthusiasms of folk religion. Evangelists achieved many converts to Protestant sects, such as Congregationalists, Baptists, and Methodists. Converts in nonconformist sects became part of numerous innovative religious movements, all founded by lay people during the early 19th century. A short list of these movements include the Latter-day Saint movement, the Millerites, the Adventists, the Seventh-day Adventists, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the International Bible Students, the Fox Sisters of Hydesville, New York, the Shakers, and the Oneida Society. In 1831, Smith and his followers moved west, planning to build a communalistic American Zion. They first gathered in Kirtland, Ohio, and established an outpost in Independence, Missouri, which was intended to be Zion's center place. During the 1830s, Smith sent out missionaries, published revelations, and supervised construction of the expensive Kirtland Temple. Nevertheless, the collapse of the church-sponsored Kirtland Safety Society and violent skirmishes with non-Mormon Missourians caused Smith and his followers to establish a new settlement in Nauvoo, Illinois, where he became a spiritual and political leader. In 1844, Smith and the Nauvoo City Council angered non-Mormons by destroying a newspaper that had criticized Smith's power and practice of polygamy. After Smith was imprisoned in Carthage, Illinois, he was killed when a mob stormed the jailhouse. Smith published many revelations and other texts that his followers regarded as scripture. His teachings included unique views about the nature of God, cosmology, family structure, political organizations, and religious collectivism. His followers regarded him as a prophet, compared to Moses and Elijah, and several religious denominations considered themselves the continuation of the church he organized, including the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Community of Christ. During the Second Great Awakening, the region where Joseph Smith and his family lived was a hotbed of religious enthusiasm, and between 1817 and 1825 there were several camp meetings and revivals in the Palmyra area. Although Smith's parents disagreed about religion, the family was caught up in this excitement. Smith later said he became interested in religion at about the age of 12. Without doubt, he participated in church classes and read the Bible. As a teenager, he may have been sympathetic to Methodism. With other family members, Smith also engaged in religious folk magic, not an uncommon practice at the time. Both his parents and his maternal grandfather reportedly had visions or dreams that they believed communicated messages from God. Smith said that although he had become concerned about the welfare of his soul, he was confused by the claims of competing religious denominations. Years later, Smith said that in 1820 he had received a vision that resolved his religious confusion. While praying in a wooded area near his home, he said that God, in a vision, had told him his sins were forgiven and that all contemporary churches had turned aside from the gospel. Smith said he told the experience to a preacher who dismissed the story with contempt. But the experience was largely unknown even to most Mormons until the 1840s. Although Smith may have understood the event as a personal conversion, this first vision later grew in importance among Mormons who today see it as the first event in the restoration of the gospel. Smith said that in 1823, while praying one night for forgiveness from his sins, he was visited by an angel named Moroni, who revealed the location of a buried book made of golden plates, as well as other artifacts, including a breastplate and a set of interpreters composed of 3 seer stones set in a frame, which had been hidden in a hill in Manchester near his home. Smith said he attempted to remove the plates the next morning, but was unsuccessful because the angel prevented him. Smith reported that during the next 4 years he made annual visits to the hill, but each time returned without the plates. Meanwhile, the Smith family faced financial hardships due in part to the November 1823 death of Smith's older brother Alvin, who had assumed a leadership role in the family. Family members supplemented their meager farm income by hiring out for odd jobs and working as treasure seekers, a type of magical supernaturalism common during the period. Smith was said to have an ability to locate lost items by looking into a seer stone, which he also used in treasure hunting, including several unsuccessful attempts to find buried treasure sponsored by a wealthy farmer in Shenango County, New York. In 1826, Smith was brought before a Shenango County court for glass-looking or pretending to find lost treasure. The result of the proceedings remains unclear, as primary sources report varying, conflicting outcomes. While boarding at the Hale House in Harmony, Pennsylvania, Smith began courting Emma Hale. When Smith proposed marriage, Emma's father, Isaac Hale, objected because Smith was a stranger who had no means of supporting his daughter, other than money digging, of which he disapproved. Smith and Emma eloped and were married on January 18, 1827, after which the couple began boarding with Smith's parents in Manchester. Later that year, when Smith promised to abandon treasure-seeking, Hale offered to let the couple live on his property in Harmony and help Smith get started in business. Smith said that he made his last annual visit to the Hill on September 27, 1827, taking Emma with him. This time he said he retrieved the plates and put them in a locked chest. He said the angel commanded him not to show the plates to anyone else, but to publish their translation, reputed to be the religious record of indigenous Americans. Smith said that the plates were engraved in an unknown language he called Reformed Egyptian, and he told associates that he was capable of reading and translating them. Although Smith had left his treasure-hunting company, his former associates believed he had double-crossed them by taking for himself what they considered the joint property. After they ransacked places where a competing treasure-seer said the plates were hidden, Smith decided to leave Palmyra. In October 1827, Smith and his pregnant wife moved from Palmyra to Harmony, now Oakland, Pennsylvania, aided by money from a relatively prosperous neighbor, Martin Harris. Living near his in-laws, Smith transcribed some characters that he said were engraved on the plates, and then dictated a translation to his wife. In February 1828, Martin Harris arrived to assist Smith by transcribing his dictation. Harris also took a sample of the characters to a few prominent scholars, including Charles Anthony and Charles Anthon, who Harris said initially authenticated the characters and their translation, but then retracted his opinion after learning that Smith was supposed to have received the plates from an angel. Anthon denied Harris's account of the meeting, claiming instead that he had tried to convince Harris that he had been the victim of a fraud. Nevertheless, Harris returned to Harmony in April 1828, encouraged to continue as Smith's scribe. Smith continued to dictate to Harris until mid-June 1828, when Harris began having double doubts about the project. Fueled in part by his wife's skepticism, Harris convinced Smith to let him take the existing 116 pages of manuscript to Palmyra to show a few family members, including his wife. Harris lost the manuscript, of which there was no other copy, at about the same time as Smith's wife, Emma, gave birth to a son, Alvin, who died the same day. Smith said that as punishment for losing the manuscripts, the angels took away the plates and revoked his ability to translate. During this dark period, Smith briefly attended Methodist meetings with his wife until a cousin of hers objected to inclusion of a practicing necromancer on the Methodist class roll. Smith said that the angel returned the plates to him on September 22, 1828, and he resumed dictation in April 1829 after he met Oliver Crowdery, who replaced Harris as his scribe. They worked full-time on the manuscript between April and early June 1829 and then moved to Fayette, New York, where they continued to work at the home of Crowdery's friend Peter Whitmer. When the narrative described an institutional church and a requirement for baptism, Smith and Crowdery baptized each other. Dictation was completed around July 1, 1829. Although Smith had previously refused to show the plates to anyone, he told Martin Harris, Oliver Crowdery, and David Whitmer that they would be allowed to see them. These men, known collectively as the Three Witnesses, along with a larger group of 8 witnesses, composed of male members of the Whitmer and Smith families, signed statements testifying that they had seen the golden plates. The 8 witnesses also said that they had actually handled the plates. According to Smith, The angel Moroni took back the plates once Smith finished with using them. The completed work, the Book of Mormon, was published in Palmyra on March 26, 1830 by printer E.B. Grandin, Martin Harris having mortgaged his farm to finance it. Soon after, on April 6, 1830, Smith and his followers formally organized the Church of Christ, and small branches were established in Palmyra, Fayette, and Colesville, New York. The Book of Mormon brought Smith's regional notoriety and opposition from those who remembered his money digging, which is known as treasure hunting, and the 1826 Shenango County trial. After Crowdery baptized several new members, the Mormons received threats of mob violence, and before Smith could confirm the newly baptized members, he was arrested and brought to trial as a disorderly person. He was acquitted, but both he and Crowdery had to flee Colesville to escape a gathering mob. In probable deference to his period of flight, Smith said that Peter, James, and John had appeared to him and had ordained him and Crowdery to a higher priesthood. Smith's authority was undermined when Oliver Crowdery, Hiram Page, and other church members also claimed to receive revelations. In response, Smith dictated a revelation which clarified his office as a prophet and an apostle, and which declared that only he held the keys of the mysteries and the revelations, with the ability to inscribe scripture for the church. Shortly after the conference, Smith dispatched Crowdery, Peter Whitmore, and others on a mission to proselytize Native Americans. Crowdery was also assigned the task of locating the site of the New Jerusalem.